Hello and welcome to Larry Has Opinions. Something I've always appreciated about Joe Abercrombie's writing is his depiction of war. War can often be glamorized and glorified in a lot of fantasy stories, but something that Abercrombie always tries to show is how scarring and traumatizing it can be for most people who take part in it, and sometimes how it can just be overall pointless even in the bigger scheme of things. However, I was slightly conflicted before picking up the heroes, because I also find battle sequences incredibly boring. But I was really glad to find that this book was anything but boring. I started my first Lord journey last year when I read the original trilogy, which I really liked. And then later in the year, I read Best Served Cold, which I wasn't too impressed by. And if you're curious to find out why, I have a full review on the channel as well. So I was a bit apprehensive before picking up the heroes because, as I said, I'm not too keen on battle sequences, and the whole book revolves around a 3-day battle that happens in the north of the circle of the world. I was really worried that I would find myself utterly bored having to follow skirmish after skirmish, and then another duel and another battle and so on. However, there's so much more to the story that absolutely proved me wrong. First of all, I really love the setting. Abercrombie has this way of really creating this atmospheric, and in this case, very claustrophobic vibe to his descriptions, because we're really stuck in this very narrow area, pretty much in the same way that the soldiers are, and we seem to never be able to leave this small part of the world. There are obviously several action sequences with battles and duels, so if that's what you enjoy, you're not going to be disappointed, especially because they're very well written, with his shifting of POVs in the middle of an action, on the middle of a sequence, which I think makes the reading experience very enjoyable and very suspenseful as well. But what I really love is that he's not just showing the fighting, but he's showing a lot of the drudgery and the long waits and all the kind of less glamorous side of war itself, which is not just a half day of the fighting action, but there's so much more to it, with so much that can go wrong when it comes to the long marches or the communication between different sections of the army and so on. I also very much enjoyed the strategic side of this kind of military story, which I like in general much more than the action sequences themselves. So seeing how the kind of generals are trying to coordinate these battles and where the different parts of the army are and how they move and which way they're thinking about the upcoming battle. There's also a few maps as well, which I love, again, where you can see the different generals, where they stand and how they're moving with respect to the opposing armies as well. And what I really appreciated is, as the title of the book itself suggests, is this disquisition about what being a hero means. What is that all about? How do you interpret the actions of these characters that we follow in the story as an external observer to this scenario, if you like? So it's not just a war story for the entertainment of following these action sequences, but there's definitely this kind of additional thoughtful layer on top of it, which makes it a really engaging read. And where Abercrombie always shines, as usual, is in his character work. So some of the characters are recurring from some of the previous stories, even though they tended to be secondary characters in the previous books, and some are just brand new. Bremer is probably my favorite, probably not a very unusual opinion there. I have to say the first couple of chapters, I wasn't too sold on him because it sounded a bit more like a reenactment of Glockta with just the usual inner monologue, which tends to be very cynical. So it was kind of similar in tone to that, but as the story moved on, eventually, like I really found myself really enjoying following Bremer, absolutely. Some of the other characters, some are more enjoyable than others. I have to say that one or two of the main POVs were not particularly memorable, but still, I never found myself like begrudging moving to different POV and think, oh, I can't be bothered following this one. I don't care about this character. I was pretty much engaged and invested in pretty much all of them. Something that I quite liked about the original trilogy was the subversion of some of the traditional fantasy tropes. And that is one of the reasons why Best Served Cold let me down a little bit, because I found that one a bit too predictable. I was hoping Abercrombie would do something different with it and didn't really go for it, in my opinion. Whereas in The Heroes, again, I found that that subversion is present again, which I very much enjoy. That's one of the reasons why I'm not super keen on more traditional fantasy stories, because I found them a bit tropey and predictable. Here, there is some tropey characters for sure. When they pop up, you just recognize the typical, sort of stereotypical fantasy characters. But the character arcs that they follow are definitely not tropey. So you could easily predict, oh, I can see like this type of character, this is what's going to happen. But that's never what's going to happen in this case. So again, that I was very impressed by. Abercrombie's prose is also as solid as usual. It's never lyrical or anything like that, but it's always very effective and also quite beautiful in a very understated way. I really enjoyed being back in the First Law world, and even though I'm typically not really into military fantasy, I have to say I found there was a really good balance between the action sequences on one hand and the more strategic and political side of the story on the other, all accompanied by the usual masterful character work that Joe Abercrombie is known for. If you're not into military stories yourself, you might not necessarily love this book, but I would say that most First Law fans will probably like it well enough. So after the lull with Best Served Cold, I have to say that this has reignited my wish to continue with the series, and I think Red Country will be next for me. So given how much I enjoyed it, my rating for the book is 9 out of 10. I hope you guys liked this video. Please give me a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what your favorite First Law book is, if you've read any. Join our Discord, the link is in the description box, and I'll see you next time.